Hello everyone, Jeremy here for the channel Lifelong Learning. I have been debating about making a new video for a while. I haven't been available. I took some time off. So for the few ones who have been watching my first two videos, huge thanks. And I hope you will get to like this one, which is focused on how to take notes and how not to take notes. And I'm not a professional in this area. I just want to share the few tips and tricks that I learned over time with my personal application. One of the ways that I learn the best is by experimenting new stuff, trying new stuff, of course, reading from the great minds, watching some great YouTube channels on this topic. And if you want, by the way, I can recommend some, which hugely inspired me to start this channel. And so, yeah, that's the way I learn about new stuff. And I think that taking notes in the same way as learning how to learn. So if you watch my second video, probably on learning how to learn, taken from the book Ultra Learning from Scott Young, for me are very interesting topics because they are kind of meta learning topics. Taking notes is really, really central to the way you will learn, whether you're a student or a professional going through learning classes or even reading. Today we will focus on the topic of reading in itself, because I consider it to be central and it has ramifications with a lot of other topics. So I will be focusing on reading books, nonfiction or fiction. It doesn't matter for that matter, because I consider that it's useful to take notes whatever you're reading. So maybe that's a hot take, but I have been talking about this with some friends of mine, and they have told me like, oh no, I don't take notes because I prefer to enjoy reading. Or, oh no, I don't take notes because it will be too much of a hassle. Or, oh no, I don't take notes because, I don't know, I don't want to be distracted while I'm reading. So you oftentimes hear these remarks and these comments, and this is fair. I am one of the first of saying this kind of things. Guilty of that. But at the same time, I like to remind myself of the following. Why am I doing what I'm doing in this life? Why am I reading something? What am I expecting of that? I think this is a great question to ask yourself. Why am I studying this degree? Maybe this is more obvious when for that matter, when you study a discipline and you want to remember something because you have an exam. That's maybe, in this type of scenario, you can understand why you're taking notes, because you want things to be remembered, and then taking notes is a great way for you to dissect and to articulate your learning process. But when it's more of a hobby, let's say, or something that you do in your own time for yourself, I consider that it's not less important to take notes. So for instance, when you read a book, like, what do you want to get out of this book? Whether it's conscious or not, you have this question is present. You need to think about, do I have a conscious answer to bring to that? And does it matter to me? Of course it does. It matters. Whatever we do, it needs to be done with a purpose in mind. Whether it's recreational or whether it's because you want to improve at something or learn something better, it needs to be done with a purpose in mind. And that will guide your actions. And that is the way you will do things better. Because if we do something better, if these things are done well, that's my opinion. So if I'm reading something, in my opinion, I want to understand what I'm reading first and foremost. I want to be able to remember what I read, and I want to be able to discuss what I read, and I want to be able to articulate what I read with other content. So for instance, I'm reading, let's say, great book, by the way, I really recommend, Plato, The Republic. I read this book. Well, it's a philosophical book. And then I read another book, which is Dostoevsky, Crime and Punishment. Great book, by the way, as well. And yeah, so when I read each content independently, like, ultimately it serves a bigger purpose. I want to learn probably about philosophy embedded in a narrative arc or for its own purpose. So, and then probably there are some things, some bridges that I can make between these two. But this is not possible if I rely only on my memory. So this is an argument that I want to make for people who read on a regular basis. And even if they think it's recreational, it doesn't matter because taking notes, I think you should take notes for whatever you're reading. And I'm not saying it should be extensive. I'm going to talk about that. I'm not saying it should be super extensive, like if you were going to take an exam. There are degrees in whatever we are doing. We can do sports once a week. We can do sports every day of the week for a month, for a year. It doesn't matter. My only point is when you say, I don't want to take notes, what do you mean by taking notes? Think about that. And what do you mean by I don't want to take notes? Like, what is the reason why you're taking no notes? That's my point. So I'm going a bit on a tangent here, but I think this is really important. Why? Because in our memory, we tend to remember things that are salient, things that are important to us. Why? Because we associate them with effects, with emotions. So it could be something for which you feel indignation, for instance, or something you feel, I don't know, you're excited about, or something really deep. But you will not remember all the ins and outs of all the ideas that you're going to read. And some of them, it's a good thing that you don't remember. But for some others, I think it's good to learn about what led you to X and Y topic. And also, so I think it's a filter process. When you read, you want to take as much as possible from this content and then being able to spread those ideas again. So anyways, I hope I made my point across. Reading is so, so important. I cannot tell you how much, for instance, I read this book and I took some notes and I haven't extracted them all. Right now, if you ask me what this book is about, I will be able to tell you, but not in a really deep way and a really articulate way, which is the purpose. If you want to communicate to someone, read this book, this is amazing. That's one of the reasons why you talk to someone about a book, right? So you want this person to read the book because it might transform their life. And so for you to share as much as possible about the topic and the content and the reason why someone should read a book, which is again one of the reasons why you would tell someone to read a book, it's better if you have your ideas sorted out somewhere. And the best way to do it is writing. Writing is the same thing as thinking, as Jordan Peterson puts it, or other people as well, for that matter, not only him. And I really agree with that. So anyways, I made my point across, I hope. Also because our memory is flawed, you will not be able to, let's say, discuss all the intricacies of a book or any content that you're gonna watch or study. And so that's the reason why we write. Okay, that being said, there are some things that I did over time that I'm constantly trying approaches to take notes. And as with a lot of things, I consider that there is not one way to do things. Everyone is different, but for each and every person, there is a way to do something well that works for you. So what I'm going to tell you today worked or didn't work for me, but it might do the opposite for you. I'm just sharing ideas and in the hopes that it helps someone. And I'm also sorry if this feels raw, not edited. I don't have any notes, but I was thinking, if you want this to be perfect, you're never going to put this there. So this is why I'm doing this. Anyways, so there are levels to take notes. You can take no notes. I already covered that. And I think this is not a good idea, except if it's really, like if you think, if I don't remember nothing about this book, it's okay. Yeah, but then why would you take notes? Anyways, I don't want to come back there. Anyways, so you have levels of taking notes. You can take notes on every little idea that you thought was interesting, or you can take notes like, let's say as a summary after reading the book. So there are many ways to take notes. That's fascinating. You can take notes on any page or in a paragraph. You can take notes after the fact, relying on your memory. You can take notes asking questions. You can take notes, let's say, just circling some words. So there are many formats and ways to take notes. And today I want to share some tips and tricks, what I did that worked for me and what didn't. Okay, so one example, this book, The Republic. I found it fascinating. I couldn't summarize it to you, but in a really, let's say, summarized manner. And I'm sorry if this is inaccurate for the professionals here. That's relying on my memory. And one reason for that is because my approach of taking notes was not good. So in this book, you have Socrates going through what we call the Socratic method and talking with a lot of his peers on what would be the ideal society. And so he starts asking the question, what is justice? And so they ask a lot of questions. What do they mean by justice? And then what does that lead to? And then there are several steps. So we talk about justice, we talk about education, we talk about, let's say, the special role of the how can I say, the guardians of peace. I don't remember exactly the names. And you can sense that my approach to take notes was not great because I'm not making a good job at summarizing it. Anyways, so I really encourage you to read it because that's a great way, an introduction to philosophy, in my opinion. It's a bit deep and it's a bit heavy, to be honest. Maybe I wouldn't start there, but to me, at least, it was still a great introduction. It's good to have something to start with. Probably it's not the best one to start. Anyways, so yeah, that is so deep that you want to circle everything and you want to take notes about everything. So I don't know if this is also book dependent, probably, if taking notes is book dependent. Let's say for one book, you will take notes in one way, and for another book, you will take notes another way. For this book specifically, I would say that I didn't do it well. So you will probably see I took notes like almost everywhere. All of the pages are like this, all of the pages. Okay, so then coming back to the main idea, why do we take notes? I wanted to take notes because I wanted to be able to summarize this book accurately and defend its ideas, or maybe write some essays related to these ideas, articulating with other books. And so my willingness of being exhaustive, let's say, led me to a suboptimal approach. I don't like this approach. It's not useful because I'm writing so much that it's as if I was writing the book all over again. And I wouldn't do a good job of writing the book all over again. So it defeats the purpose. My goal was to extract all of these ideas in a software like Obsidian and then summarize and have my essay written and articulate with other ideas and so on and so forth. And the problem with this approach is that I took so many notes that I needed literally to carve out some times in my agenda to extract all of these notes. So for instance, I would say on Monday, I will go from page 141 to 151. But you add friction by doing that. You add friction because you're like, oh no, tomorrow I have to extract again all these notes. And also another problem is that it's one thing to write in context while you're reading it. It's another thing to come back to it 2 weeks later and only reading the notes without having to come back to the main content. So it defeats the purpose, in my opinion. So that's one way of taking notes, and I honestly didn't like it. Probably if I carve out enough time to go through everything, all of my notes and so on and so forth, yeah, probably it's even better to read the book again, to be honest. And it would be worth it. Okay, so that's another approach. A second approach that I had was with Crime and Punishment, from Dostoevsky. Again, you will see why my note-taking approach was not so great, even though I really love the book and I highly encourage you to read it. So in a nutshell, that's the story of Raskolnikov, who is a student who interrupted his studies and I don't want to spoil you, this happens very, very early, and it's even written in the title, commits a crime. And we want to understand throughout the whole book, why did he commit the crime? And yeah, so philosophically, like this is fascinating because the author uses a narrative and uses to a great extent, let's say, the characters, personalities, and so on to communicate ideas. That's the main gist of the book. Like there is philosophy intricate in this book, woven into a story. So that's amazing. It challenges your view of the world. So, for instance, one great example is, if I'm not quoting this incorrectly, Raskolnikov says at some point, yeah, but if you're a great person, like Napoleon, let's say, he was considered great even though he murdered people. Um, so maybe I'm not considered great if I murder one person, but because like my ideas haven't been pushed to the limit yet, and I haven't assumed my ideas to the fullest. That's one example, right? And so, yeah, there are some, let's say, discussions, philosophical discussion. When is it right to kill or not to kill? And so people defend these ideas, and there are also other ideas like helping the poor. To what extent can you sacrifice yourself to help your family, and so on and so forth. So I'm doing a bad job of summarizing it, and the reason why it's because my note-taking approach was not so great again. What I did is basically, so you can see here, there is way less notes taken, but I still took notes. Maybe you will see in some pages. Anyway, maybe not. So I took notes in the book at some passages, but the approach was really different. It was like I read a chapter and then I close the book and I take notes in the margins somewhere, or on a separate, for that matter, on a separate notebook. And that was amazing. That is amazing because you just finished, and so these ideas are uniquely yours. You're not biased by the words being written, and you fully digested the idea and you make it your own. And so you rewrite it. I would say that's the first level, is trying to rewrite what you just read with your own words. That's one way to look at it. And then you can, as you're with a notebook, you have way more space, so you can write a lot. You can ask questions. You can reflect on what you read and so on. Okay, the only downside to this, personally, is that you always need to have both with you, and it's sometimes cumbersome. But I think it's worth it. I think it's worth it. So let's say you want to read on a train or on a plane. Maybe it's not so easy, or on the metro, the subway. Maybe it's not easy, but it's worth it if you can find a way. And if you have a way, but let me know. One way I found in the past was using this kind of small notebook. So I have some notes here. I embed, let's say, this kind of notebook inside, and I place it with the cover, and that's really helpful. It has also something to hold the pen, really helpful. But it's very tiny, but it helps. It helps. I would say the main problem with that approach is that, okay, you're writing somewhere. First, I think a good thing is to read only one book at a time. You will say, yeah, that's obvious, but maybe not. And it was not so obvious to me in the past. Sometimes I would read 2 to 3 books at a time, one in the morning, one in the afternoon, one in the evening, whatever. So if you write everything in a notebook, you will have like everything will be, let's say, one page you have one book, another page you have another book. It's a mess. So that's one downside. You need to be really diligent about where you're writing and referencing everything and so on. Because I think ultimately the purpose of what I did was to go back to all the pages that I wrote my ideas and copying that in a software and digesting that and writing essays about this. That's my goal. But I didn't do a good job about this because it added friction. Basically, I wrote my ideas, but then the thought of, oh, I have to go back there and read it again and copy this to another software. And that is adding friction to me. And that's why I'm not doing a good job right now at summarizing it, although it's a it's an amazing book. So that's another way that I did. And now I'm experimenting with another approach, which is for this type of books on psychology, for instance, short introduction, very short introduction. Basically, I'm doing a bit of both. I write in the margins, but it's not to come back later. I still do this new approach, which is writing in the notebook once I finish a chapter, and I summarize everything. And I divide things into columns. So the first column is like what comes from my memory, and the second column here is when I sense that I forgot something that I think would be important, well, I will add it. And so it's less coming from memory. So, but it's still good. And I think I need to do some work in the next steps about on basically being diligent about coming back to what I wrote and synthesizing everything and doing that soon enough after having read. And that is a main difficulty for me. So if you're like me, if you're a busy professional, let's say, you have your work 9 to 5, like a lot of people, you read a little bit in the morning, a little bit in the afternoon. And so it's like, yeah, then I need to carve out some time to extract all of these ideas and discuss them and writing essays. I mean, that's the goal, ultimately. You want to be able to articulate your readings. That's my goal. So I hope it's more of a don't video than a do's and don'ts, and I'm sorry for that, but I just wanted to share my experience about writing, about taking notes. I know there are great books on the topic. I didn't want to read them because sometimes I have the problem of let's say analysis paralysis. So I'm reading too much on how to do something, and I'm not reading the important stuff that I really want to learn about, like psychology, like philosophy, like history. And so I thought taking notes, I can learn that by practicing it. And I may be wrong about this. I was like, probably I need to read books on how to take smart notes. I'm not saying the opposite, but probably this is not priority right now. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. I'll make a video about that in the future to let you know what I thought about this. Anyways, I had a blast making this video. Thank you for tuning in. If you want me to cover other topics, I mainly talk about learning, ways to learn, what to learn, how to learn, what I learned, and so on and so forth in this channel. So if you want me to cover either one topic, let me know in the comments. And if you liked this video, if you learned at least one thing, please subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you know when the next video is coming. And until then, take care. Cheers.